Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Storytime with Father Growley. I'm Father Trace Browning from All Saints Church in Salt Lake City, Utah. So one of the most important people in the Bible is someone named Moses. Moses lived a long time ago, several thousand years ago. He lived long before Jesus. There are so many great stories about Moses in the Bible and how God used Moses to help the whole people of Israel. So Father Growley tonight is playing the part of Moses in tonight's story, and that's why he has this scarf on his head and a staff in his hand, as Moses used to carry, and a nice beard there, Father Growley. And so tonight we're going to tell the story of Moses and the people of Israel in the wilderness. Moses and the people of Israel in the wilderness. So, a long time ago, all the people of Israel were living far from home. They lived in the land of Egypt. The problem was they were slaves in the land of Egypt. And being a slave means having a very hard life. They had to work whenever the Egyptians wanted them to, which was every day. They didn't have time to rest. It was a very difficult life. They didn't have time to worship God the way they wanted to. So it was this very hard life. Well, Moses, one day, he was a Jew, but he lived far from Egypt, and he was taking care of his sheep on the mountain, and he heard the voice of God call to him, saying, "Moses, I've heard the cries of my people Israel. I have heard them cry out of slavery in Egypt, and I'm going to set them free." And Moses thought, that's great news. And then God said, "Moses, I'm going to ask you to help me do it. I'm sending you to help set the people free." So Moses trusted in God, and he went back to Egypt. And there's these great stories in the Bible, these very exciting stories about what God did to help free the people of Israel. These miracles and these signs that happened in Israel, or in Egypt, all so that Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, would finally let the people go, finally let the people of Israel go free. And you can ask your parents or read some of the stories in the Bible about all those great, exciting stories. Well, so Israel had been freed from Egypt. They were out in the wilderness, and God promised that he would lead them to the promised land, which sounds pretty darn good. And it was all the people of Israel, hundreds and hundreds of people, all their flocks of sheep and cattle that they had, and they began this long journey home to their homeland, to the promised land. But it was going to take a very long time. And I want you to think about a long trip that you have been on. Have you ever been on a trip, maybe you get in the car with your family, and you ask your parents, "How long will this trip take?" And they say, 4 hours. And you think, "Oh my goodness, that's a long time." Or maybe if it's longer still, your parents say, "This trip will be there in about 4 days." This trip of Moses and the people in the wilderness was much longer. Imagine asking your parents, "How long will be on this journey?" And they say, "Probably about 40 years. 40 years! That's how long this trip took in the wilderness. So the Bible tells what happened during all this time, and sometimes were easier in that 40 years, and sometimes were very difficult. There was one time, for example, when the people were all gathered around. They were far from waters, no rivers, no lakes around them. They began to get very thirsty, and their flocks and animals were getting very thirsty. And they began to complain and say, "Boy, Moses, why did you and God lead us out here just to be so thirsty? I hope we don't die of thirst." Well, Moses prayed to God, and God asked Moses, I'm going to move the lamb here, God asked Moses to strike the rock with his staff, and something amazing happened. The rock split open in two, and water gushed out. It just gushed out of the rock. Fresh water for everyone to drink, and they drank that water for many, many days, teaching them that God would take care of them. God would provide for them. There was a long time when they didn't have food. The land was barren, not much there, and they didn't know what they were going to eat every day. And again, the people started to complain, saying, "Oh, Moses, why did you and God lead us out here? We have no food to eat. I hope we don't die from starvation." Moses once again prayed to God, and God said, "I will take care of that." He said, every day, have the people wake up early and go out and gather something called manna, this food from heaven that I will send to them. Manna, sometimes called the bread of heaven. We don't know exactly what it looked like, but it was fine and kind of flaky and thin. And it was pretty good. And every day the people of Israel would go out, gather manna enough for them and their whole family for the day, and they would have enough to eat for the whole day. The next day, there would be no food in the house, so they'd go out, gather more manna, and they would have food. And God sustained them day upon day after day. During these 40 years, the people of Israel learned about themselves, and most of all, they learned about God. They learned that God was always with them. God had never left them. God was always guiding them. And God always loved them and cared for them. Those are important lessons, not only for Israel, those are important lessons for us. Whenever we are going through a time that is difficult, that is hard, it's good to remember that God is always with us, that God is still guiding us and caring for us. I know lots of us are going through this time with this pandemic where school has changed, our jobs have changed, so much of our life has changed, and we're waiting for things to get better. And while we're waiting, during this long time, and sometimes a difficult time, it's good to remember the lessons that Moses and the people of Israel learned. God is still with us. God still loves us. God is still guiding us. So that is the story of Moses and the people of Israel in the wilderness. I hope you enjoyed it. So that was the story of Moses and the people of Israel in the wilderness. A wonderful story with a lot to reassure us that God is always with us. We have a song tonight. It comes from the country of Ghana, which is in the western part on the African continent. So it comes from Ghana. The African word title is Woyaya. Woyaya, which means we are going. So we will sing this song in English, Woyaya. We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We'll know within, we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. It This is our final prayer. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord's face shine upon you with grace and mercy. The Lord look upon you with favor and give you peace, this night and always. Amen. Good night, everyone, and may God bless.